Welcome to Solution Focused Future. I'm Joe George. Here we are today with Ms. Debbie Hogan. And Debbie, how do you like to be introduced?
It's called Academy of Solution Focused Training. I'm based in Singapore, and we do a lot of training in the US, Europe, Asia. We've become global, especially since the COVID. We were mostly just doing face to face, and then COVID hit, and I guess everyone was forced to do online. And it actually was a good move because now we really have a global audience.
Why focused therapy? How did you gravitate to this?
I'm a therapist. That's my first love. And 15 years in, when I was practicing more of an eclectic approach, which was maybe 2 or 3 different models, I got burned out and I started to ask around. This was in the early 90s. And I always liked to meet with other professionals for my own PD and peace of mind and trying to keep sanity. And someone in this counseling group brought a tape of Insu, and I hadn't never heard about it. She showed the tape. And I have to tell you, I was really I was mocking it a little bit. I just thought it was too good to be true. Yet I was really fascinated. It was Insu, working with Kindle, a hardcore alcoholic. And around that time, I was also looking around and asking, what are people interested? How do you keep your practice alive? And I was asking people in Singapore, but there weren't a lot of opportunities. So I was looking in the US, and everyone I talked to said, hey, you need to look at solution focused grief therapy. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I just saw a tape of Insu. So I thought I'd go to Milwaukee. I'm going to go to the source. And of course, I was already fascinated because Insu is Korean, or was Korean, and I'm part Korean. And so I felt a little bit of interest there. And I got a flyer in the mail that they were coming to Singapore. And I was delighted because in Singapore in those early years, there was not any professional development, no courses, or they would bring in the external trainers, they drop in and then they leave. And then we were left on our own. And so I took the training, and it just totally just revolutionized me, the way I practice, flipped everything upside down. I had to unlearn what I'd spent 15 years learning. And I realized, hey, I'm not burned out anymore. There's something about this. And I never turned back. Yeah.
Do you use solution focused thinking in your own life?
When I was learning it and I was struggling to incorporate it into my practice, how do I do this whole piece of work? So I just did pieces of the work, like the scaling, and kind of clumsy at it. The real transformation came when I was butting heads with my daughter, who was a teenager. And that's when we were really butting heads. And I just thought, man, I got to find something so I can connect with this child. And I used some of these ideas, and I was just flabbergasted at how, oh, wow, if I'm just respectful and ask her opinion, wow, that's a switcheroo. Who would have thought, things like that. So yeah, it became a way in which I actually used it in my life. It became a kind of philosophy to how I approach everything and anything.
Excuse me. What are the 3 most important things that people should master if they're trying to use solution focused thinking?
Exactly. It is a thinking, it is a philosophy, a mindset. So I would say that would be the first thing, is to not think of it in terms of a technique. If I just do these techniques, then I'll be SF. Because we know you can use the scaling question, the miracle question, all of those tools, beautiful tools, and not be solution focused. And okay, so it's a mindset. The bedrock are the assumptions. And I would say discipline. The discipline Insu would talk about is easy to learn, but hard to do, because we just naturally go into that problem solving or pathology mode. And that's the discipline is, resist the urge to do that, explore the problem and really focus on what the person wants. What's the difference that they're looking for?
Everybody brings their own experiences into their practice. And what was your original theoretical approach? You mentioned there were two or three
Yeah.
blurred, but how did those things influence your current application of solution focused practice?
Thought I just loved Gestalt because I love the attending to the person, to the emotions and what you see, and the systemic idea, the family systems view of looking at the whole interaction in the system, and then CBT, which was, yeah, we all have these horrible irrational beliefs, so let's just sort of attack those and get it right. But I just found that those were inadequate. And so when I found a solution focus, it seemed to be the model that fit me the best. And I don't use anything.
You mentioned you do a lot of coaching and training.
Mhm.
What fields beyond counseling do you feel best aligned with solution focused thinking?
Well, here in Singapore, as a trainer, I have trained people in the therapy world, but also in schools. We've done loads of SF work, the WOW program that you might have heard of that INSU developed. We've done lots of training and coaching in the coaching world. And I would say if you just make a list of where an SF mindset can be used, you just fill in the blank. And in Singapore, because it was early days and there wasn't really a community of practice and really a mature development of SF, I would just say, let me invite you, experiment with these ideas, write it up and come back and let's talk about it. And we started to have these peer supervision groups. And I started writing up the stories because they were amazing stories. And then I said, somebody's going to write a book. So can I document this story? Then I waited and waited. And I think it was John Hendon that said, Debbie, you should write that book. So I thought, hey, I've got all these great stories. I'm not going to write about my work. I'm going to write about this community. And it covered SF in supervision, in schools and education, in therapy, in coaching, and in organizational development, and lots of beautiful chapters. How it works in Asia by 48 authors. Right now, coaching in Asia is one of the big emerging markets. It's exploding. And one of the big trends is training internal coaching. So we have contracts with some banks, with the government, with the top leaders in government, and they're sending cohorts to our training. So that's always a big encouragement when you have top government in a country saying, of all the coaching programs, we're choosing yours, which is solution focus, because we love the philosophy and we want our organization to have this kind of coaching culture. The same with some banks, with schools.
Were there any moments that you felt solution focused brief therapy wasn't working for you?
Also, I felt like when I did get stuck or when the client would report, things were not better, things weren't changing to their satisfaction, I wouldn't think of it as a failure of the model. I would think of it as, okay, I need to approach it differently. What can I do differently? And so that would help me to explore that just a little bit to help movement happen.
If you had to come up with an advertising campaign for solution focused brief therapy, what would your slogan be?
Words, I think of Gandhi, right? Be the change you want to see in the world. So it'd be something like that. But those are not my words. I'm stealing somebody else's words.
I know you've done a bunch of these interviews, and I know you've also, I see you post on LinkedIn and all these different things with different people you're connected to. What else am I missing? What's out there that's exciting in the world of solution focused practice and in the world of Singapore that you'd like to talk about?
One thing I'm very excited about is the maturity of the solution focus community here in Singapore. And now we have an expansion, our academy has an expansion of training teams like in Cambodia and in Rwanda. And these are people who've been trained in our program and who are, living elsewhere and who are developing. So in Cambodia, we have a team and they're developing leaders. So think about Cambodia and the huge possibility for developing leadership within Cambodia. And these are people who speak Khmer, the language in Cambodia. And then in Rwanda, we have a team and they're working with women to help them to learn how to going through coach training, being coach, who then they can pay that forward. And then that leads. So if you think about just the tiny seed and then it just explodes. So it's exploding. We've got a team developing in China, taking solution focused coaching into China. We've already got a team in the Philippines, and now they're fully their own entity. They don't have to be with us anymore. And this is my dream, to develop teams and capability to their level of maturity to launch on their own. I love people development, and that's exciting. That part of my beginning, which was I want to develop a community of practice, and it's happening.
The general use and practice of solution focus isn't necessarily as prevalent as it seems like it
Yeah.
should be. So how are you helping that?
It's a puzzle to me, I have to tell you, Joe, because I don't market, I don't sell. I have a website. That's my only, people would, that's not a good business model, but that's who I am. That's my philosophy. Let people come to me. I don't want to do a hard sell. I don't try to convince people. So I'm always amazed. Now, what is it? I asked the Prime Minister's office, of Singapore, of all the coaching programs, you've picked one, you've picked us, you've picked 3 out of thousands. And they said, because we're drawn to your good reputation, and we're drawn to this approach that we've talked to others. So there's this growing reputation about solution focus and people that use it, that practice it, and then it grows. So it has grown in the most natural and beautiful way without me trying to, be a cheerleader of it. And that is what amazes me. When something is useful, pragmatic, respectful, it resonates with people. It's not for everyone. So it attracts the right kind of people.
So what's next? You talked about all the things that are working. What's next?
Yeah. So one of the things, I started to do a little market research, and a lot of the people that were coming to our program were involved in faith-based communities. And I looked, and there wasn't really any coach training for faith-based communities that were accredited. So I created one, and we've been offering that since 2019. And so we've got cohorts that are being churned out, and these are for men and women to learn how to be a coach, first of all, and then take it to their communities, whether it's in a church or NGO or some kind of context. And this is the other area that excites me, is because you have this sort of untapped reservoir of people who need these important skills. Because I think typically in church communities, they've been sent for counseling training, where they learn all of the beautiful counseling skills to help their parishioners and develop people within, the faith-based communities, but they can't be professional counselors because they're not academically trained. However, in coaching, you can learn and you can take the training and become credentialed, and you are a completely credentialed bona fide coach. So a lot of people are attracted to that. So that's my excitement, is to enable the capability more of people in this area that there hasn't been but now there's more and more programs for this. So it's growing. The other thing is the supervision and coaching. In some associations, it's not required, like in the ICF, but in most it is. So a team, Kirsten, Kirsten Deeroff, and in Germany, and some of us in Singapore, we've formed a program. We've created a program to be accredited, and supervision will be required at some point. So we want to, and there was no supervision program for coaches. So we developed it. It's the first one. And we're really excited because supervision is different from mentor coaching, which is something else that's required. So it's a whole area that excites me about, again, developing coaches beyond getting the training, but it's the ongoing development in itself.
And how do you differentiate between counseling and coaching?
There are different lanes. And so it's very clear, ICF terms, they call it a coaching agreement. In solution-focused language, we talk about forming a goal and an agreement about what the person wants to work on. So it has to be, in coaching, it has to be something related to growth, development, versus exploring a mental health issue or pathology, or so that would be counseling. And it starts at that beginning conversation of what is it that you would like from our session, like you would do in therapy, and then the agreement, the co-construction. So if it's clearly a therapy one, coaches cannot. And then there has to be a referral to that professional. In coaching, there's a lot of possibilities because, as you know, solution-focused practice by nature is a kind of coaching approach because we don't focus on the pathology, but a lot of models and coaches do focus on the pathology. So it's interesting.
So basically, if it's problem-focused, it's counseling, and if it's solution-focused, it's coaching.
No, because coaching also can be problem focused. In solution focused world, we're isomorphic. There's a similarity in what we do in all these different practices. Other models, some coaching models are very problem focused.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's funny because in different regions, I hear the same words used differently. So I was wondering, and you have a very clear mental picture of the two lanes, but I'm not sure everybody in every region does.
Yes. And you are right. This is probably the most talked about areas, the ethics and the confusion about the different areas of practice, and how as a coach, we're called to be very clear about the role that we have as a coach and not a consultant, trainer, mentor. These lanes are very distinct. So we spend a lot of time talking about the clarity of those distinctions in our training because it's an ethical practice.
That's fascinating to me because it's funny. Like I'm a licensed professional counselor in the States, and my practice would be solely solution focused, which in Singapore you would call it coaching. So, but my certification would be in both. So I don't really distinguish between the two, and I don't look at them as different lanes.
Right. Yes, and that makes sense. There's only the need for clarity when you practice as a ICF credentialed professional coach. But certainly long before that, you couldn't tell. If you're just sitting in on a session, maybe you wouldn't be able to tell. Is this coaching? Is this therapy? Because fundamentally, we're working on what the client wants better, different, which is coaching. But we're also working on the difficulty. So.
No, I liked how you started with saying if it's pathology and digging into mental health, it's counseling. But if it's working towards attaining a desired outcome, it's coaching. And that to me makes it clear, more clear than anyone who's answered this question in the States when I've asked something similar.
World. It's only a crucial difference if you're talking about the ICF definition and clarity in those distinctions. And that in solution focused world, there's an isomorphic quality. Whatever you do in one area of practice is very similar because we're using a similar mindset, assumptions, those three key ideas that you started with. So fundamentally, it's not important to make those distinctions. Only if you practice in a world where those distinctions are encouraged. The clarity is encouraged because of the ICF and their code of ethics and those things. So otherwise, it doesn't have the same impact or importance, I think.
For next steps after you branch out to do more coaching, or finish your book, and keep going and keep doing the training, how will you know at the end of the day that you've done everything to hit your 10? What will be the first small signs?
I actually feel that even now I could just sort of quietly slip away and that it would be in good hands. It's just my own anxiety. Have I done enough? Have I trained enough? I think there's always that little bit of angst. I want to be redundant. I want to be really big and mature and strong and say, okay, y'all got this. But there's a part of me that loves the work so much that I hope I can do it till I breathe my last, because I don't see myself retiring from coaching, from supervision, from training. It's my love. I think, it's the one area that maybe your age works in your favor.
Totally. Now, you mentioned you've been in Singapore for a long time, but I noticed you have a slight twang from like Southeast U.S. something in you. Like, where are you originally from, and what brought you to Singapore?
I was hoping to sort of hide my Southern accent. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and I've been in Singapore for 36 years.
What brought you?
Yeah, my husband's parents were missionaries in Singapore, first in Pakistan. They came from Florida and they had a calling and went to Pakistan and then to Singapore. My husband grew up here and went to the American school. I met him in the US in graduate school, and he wanted to come back. And I was a little bit, a lot resistant to it. No way. My parents were missionaries in Asia as well. And I just thought, I've done that, been there, not interested. But one thing led to another. I moved here and I had to find my own good reasons to want to be here and love being here. It took a while. And that's why I started the academy. And
if you find this interesting and haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, like, or share this site and hit that little bell button to get notifications as well.